In the second half of Word Module 3, we start by reopening that wireless document that we worked on in the first half. Now I am already in Word, so I'll open it this way. I'll go to File, Open, and since I've recently worked on it, it's here in my recent folders, or I could browse and find it if it wasn't here. But I'm going to click this to open it, and I can see in the bottom right where it tells me to welcome back and pick up where I left off. I can click that and it takes me right down to where I was last time I worked on this document. We're going to continue in this document to add some more formatting changes and alignment issues, fix some alignment issues. We're going to start by going back up to the section called Help from Norris Blaine Network Consulting. It's on your first page near the top. And what we have in this section is a start of a list of personnel. We can read this sentence above it. It says, I met several times with the following personnel from Norris Blaine Network Consulting. And it has one name started, but we have a couple more names to add, and we want to add their titles. We're going to do this using tab stops, but before we do the tab stops, we'll add the additional data. So we'll click at the end of Cade Blake and press your tab key on your keyboard, and it does add an arrow when you've got the non-printing characters visible. So I pressed tab, and now I'm going to add his title, which is Senior Consultant, and then press enter, and then I'll add the second person that's in your book as well, Samuel J. Iglesias, and another tab, and also the title Senior Consultant, and then press enter, and then the last person we'll add is Beverly Sheffield-McCoy, tab, and project manager. So we have three employees listed with their titles, and a tab has been pressed in between each one, but you can see they're not lined up. Now we could have added all three of these inside a table like we learned in the last section, but tab stops are sometimes useful to line data up that doesn't necessarily need to be in a table. So what we'll do is select these three rows, and then we're going to use the ruler up at the top to add a tab stop. You can simply click anywhere on the ruler to add a tab stop, and it'll apply to the text that's selected. So I'm going to click at the 2.5 inch mark on the ruler. You can see a little L appeared, and when I point to it, it says it's a left tab. And if I move down to where I've selected the text, I can see that my tab now has been used to move the text following the tab to line up with the tab stop on the ruler. I can move that tab stop just by dragging it, and as I do, you can see that, well, I actually moved it off the ruler, so that deleted it. But if you move it around the ruler, you can see that the text also moves with it. But I'm going to leave it here. And then you can also double click a tab stop and make a few more options to it. You can add different alignments, so it can be a different type of tab stop, and even leaders that will connect the text to the left of it and the text to the right of the tab. But for this one, we'll leave it just as it is. And then we want to reduce some of the space after Cade and after Samuel so that there's not so much space between the two. So we want to just select those first two names and their titles by dragging in the left margin, and then we'll go to the paragraph group on the home ribbon and use the line and paragraph spacing button to remove space after paragraph. And now they look much better. Another thing we want to do to fix some of the alignment issues in this document is make the right edge of the text a little more even. You can see in this section how uneven it is, and a little bit down here as well. One way to fix that is to go to the Layout tab and look at this hyphenation option in your page setup group, Right now, hyphenation is not turned on, but we can make it automatic. And immediately, if you look back at this section we were just looking at, it's made that the text on the right margin much more even. And it did that by inserting hyphens in between the syllables of longer words. So throughout wasn't hyphenated before, but now it automatically has a hyphen in it. Networking automatically has a hyphen, so that the parts of the word that can fit on a line can be put there, and then the rest of the word wrapped around to the next line. So if you look through the whole document, that does make it look a lot more even along the right margin. Now we're going to add a fourth page to this document. Right now in the status bar you can see it has 3 pages. We'll add a fourth page that will have a diagram on it, and we'll want that diagram to use landscape orientation, whereas the rest of the document uses portrait. And so in order to make some of your pages have different orientations or different margins or even different headers or footers, which we'll see in a little bit, then what you have to do is add section breaks into your document. So we'll start by going to the end of this document. Control End, remember, is one quick way to do that. Control End takes us to the very end of the document. Then we'll go up to the Layout ribbon, look at the Breaks option. There's a Page Breaks section, but then we want to go down to the Section Breaks area. And for this one, we want to do a Next Page Section Break, because we want to start a new section, but we also want to start a new page at the same time. If we were starting a new section on the same page, then we would leave it at continuous. But we're going to go to Section Breaks, Next Page. It immediately moves us to the next page. We can see we're on page 4 of 4. But let's scroll up just a little bit to where we see the top of page 3, and you can see this non-printing character of a section break was added. That's just a verification that we did add it, and then we can go back down to page 4. Now, since we're going to be changing the orientation, let's go back to the View tab and choose Multiple Pages. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my navigation pane here. And I'm going to zoom out just a little more so we can see all 4 pages. And what I want to do with this 4th page is change its orientation. So I'll go back to the Layout ribbon, go to Orientation, and choose Landscape. And see how it only applied the landscape orientation to that page that I was currently on because it was a brand new section. Orientation applies to just one section, the current section that you're in. And now you can zoom back out to 120% for what we're going to do next. Now I'm actually going to zoom just to about 90% because of the way my screen is set for the recording. But the next thing we're going to do is insert a Smart Art. So I'll go to the Insert tab, and in the Illustrations group, choose Smart Art. And then we'll choose the Relationship category on the left, and then we'll scroll through until we find the one that is a converging radial. It has the 3 rectangles all pointing to a circle. We'll click Converging Radial, click OK, and it inserts the Smart Art on our page. Now, you may or may not have this text box open at the left. There's an arrow just on the left edge of your Smart Art that does open and close that text box panel. But leave it open, and this is one way to enter text into our Smart Art. So we'll start by typing for that first bullet the phrase better connectivity. And notice as we're typing, it's adding that text into the circle in the middle. And then the 3 sub-bullets relate to these 3 rectangles. So we'll click on the first one and type hardware upgrades. We'll click on the second one or arrow down to it and type wireless site survey. And again, you can see as we're typing that it's putting that text into these rectangles. Now we don't need the 3rd rectangle at all, so we can click over here on the rectangle, and you might have to click a couple of times to get these white circles called handles to appear around the rectangle, and then just press the delete key on your keyboard and it will delete that rectangle and shift everything else around to fit the space that we have. And then we can close this text box panel through this arrow, or you also have a Smart Art Tools design and a format ribbon at the top that are used to affect the Smart Art. Well, on your Smart Art Tools design, you also have a text pane button that can control whether or not that text pane is visible. But here we have our two rectangles and our circle. But notice how the wireless site survey rectangle right now on mine is selected. So anything else I do in the ribbons is just going to pertain to that rectangle. We'll click off of that just in a white area but inside the Smart Art border so that nothing is selected. You just have this one border that's selected outside of it. And then we'll change the size of the overall Smart Art. So we'll go back up to the Smart Art Tools and Format ribbon, go to the right in the size group, and we'll change the height to 6.5 inches, and we'll tab down to width and make it 9 inches and press enter. And then we can zoom out just a little bit if we want to see how that looks on the page, and then we can zoom back to 120%. Now scroll back up on your document so you see the end of page 1 and the beginning of page 2. And you can see the gray area that indicates the spacing between the two pages. And you also have room at the bottom of page 1 for a footer and at the top of page 2 for a header. And that's what we'll do here. So in the footer area for page 1, double click and it automatically takes us into the footer, and it grays out the rest of the text so that we can only work in the header and footer areas at this time. So for the footer on the first page, we're going to type your first and last name. Don't type mine, but type your first and last name and press enter. And on the second page, we will add a page number. We can do that through this Header and Footer Tools design ribbon. We can go to the header and footer group, choose page number, and we're just going to put a page number at the current position. We can choose one of these styles. We're going to use accent bar 2, and it puts a styled page number in the footer for us. And then we'll go up to the Header and Footer Tools design ribbon again in the navigation group, and we can see how we can go to headers or previous to next footers that go to different sections. So for this one, we're going to click next, and you can see how it takes us to the footer for section 2, and it's continuing the footer all through the document. We'll then go to header up in our design ribbon, and we're in the header for section 2, and notice how it says that this header is the same as the header for the previous section. Well, we don't want it to be. We want to unlink it. So click this link to previous button up in the design ribbon so that it's no longer gray, it's no longer selected, and that same as previous button disappears. Now we can make a different header in the first section and it won't appear on this last page. So we'll click on previous to go to the header for the previous section, and for this we're going to go to this header button at the far left on the design ribbon and choose a style for this header. We'll scroll down just a little bit, choose the grid style, and it comes in with placeholders. We'll click on this first placeholder that says document title and replace it with recommendations for the wireless network at Spruce and Cooper. And then we'll click the date placeholder, and we see an arrow that comes up that lets us choose a date, and we can just choose the current date. And then we can deselect the date, just click off of it, and then close the header and footer with the button up in the design ribbon. And so it puts the header on every page except for the very last page. If we look at page 4, we do not see that header there. Let's go back to View, Multiple Pages, and again, you can check the header and footer on each page. But now the last thing we'll do is add a cover page. So we'll start by pressing Control Home just to make sure that our insertion point moves to the very beginning of our document. And then we'll use the Insert ribbon at the top, and in the Pages group we'll choose Cover Page, choose a style for our cover page, and we want Grid, and it immediately puts a cover page in as the first page of our document. Let's zoom out so we can see that a little more closely. And we can see the title automatically appears. That came from the title, the document title that we put in the header in the previous step. Since we had put it in as a placeholder, it also duplicated that title here for the cover page. But one thing it did that does not look very good is it hyphenated network. Typically when you have something in all caps, you do not want anything hyphenated, but it hyphenated it because we have hyphenation on for our document. But we'll go up to the Layout ribbon and we'll choose hyphenation, and we can change the hyphenation options to not hyphenate words in caps. So let's deselect hyphenate words in caps, click OK, and it takes the hyphen out of the word network. Then we're going to replace this document subtitle placeholder with the words prepared by Ebony Wheatley. And then the other placeholder on this cover page is this one that's called an abstract, and we actually don't want to use it at all, so we can right click on it and choose this option in the middle of your shortcut menu that says Remove Content Control, and it takes that placeholder out completely. Finally, we'll scroll down to where you can see the title again on your screen, and then we're going to change the theme for this document. So we will go to the Design ribbon and use the Themes button at the top, and you can see different themes you can try, but we're going to end up with the Facet theme, and that changes the colors of our headings and our shadings for the cover pages. It also changes the fonts. If we point to the Fonts button on that Design ribbon, we can see that the theme fonts are now different than they were before. So that is the end of this document. You can save it and upload it to MindTap for grading.